Hello and welcome to the magic of fishing. You join me for what promises to be a short but very interesting session. It's a summer evening after work and I'm back on the banks of the beautiful Stockbridge Pond, which is an old estate lake run by Farnham Angling Society. You may remember I visited it for the first time back in the spring, which was actually my first trip to any of Farnham's waters after joining the club earlier this year, and I had an absolutely cracking day. Managed nearly 20 tench and also lost a really nice carp, of which there aren't many in this water, but yeah, lost a cracking common right under the rod tip. But very memorable session, and I'll put the link to that video below in the description in case you want to check it out. Tonight I'm feeling a bit less confident. That's largely because it's very still. The sun's just coming out on what was previously a very overcast day. It was quite dark when I got here and cloudy, but the sun's supposed to come out for the remaining few hours of light we've got, and it's very still, very bright. And the 3 or 4 anglers who've been here most of the day I've just been chatting to on the bank have all said that it's fishing hard. But I have faith in the baits that I've brought with me tonight, which are a little bit different to the usual stuff that I'd have in my bag. Let me show you what I've got. Now, first up is an old school classic, but still very effective. I'm sure some of you are onto it, and it can work for anything from good silvers up to big carp, but we're talking stewed wheat. And I've actually done a video in the past where I show you how to prepare this very cost-effective bait. I'll put a link to that video in the description too. I used it on the river in that video, but yeah, it's a very cost-effective bait. You can buy it dry and it really bulks up, takes on a lot of liquid. I've actually put a bit of pineapple flavouring on this, which is one of my favourites, particularly for silvers, although we're not after silvers this evening. And I took this out of the freezer, one of my pre-bagged portions, let it defrost overnight, and it's good to go. And that'll be my main feed, as well as fishing it on the hook on my waggler line. Now, second up, slightly more unusual. I don't know if many of you are onto this or have tried it in the past. More than welcome to let me know in the comments, but we're talking good old baked beans. Brilliant on toast, but can also be great on the hook. And I have taken off some of the sauce. It can be a bit messy unless you're using a pole cup to feed it. And it's a bit softer than corn, but that sort of size, and nice and pale, just like the stewed wheat. So I'll be trying that on the hook as well. And last but not least is the legendary kidney bean. Legendary in terms of chili con carne anyway. I don't mind a bit of it in there, and this bait is going to be free because my wife doesn't know that I took this out of the cupboard along with the baked beans. This is a bit of a bigger, tougher bait, stays on the hook really well, and I've got to say it really is best for carp in my experience. I've used it very effectively for float fishing for carp down the margins in the past, but we're going to try it for the tench tonight, and yeah, that really does help pick out better fish. So they're the 3 kinds of pulses and grains, or magic beans, that I'll be trying this evening. It really is brightening up now and turning into a glorious evening in terms of the weather for us anglers at least, if not ideal for catching fish. But on the right there you can see some lily pads, and they've really grown up since I was last here. I'll be fishing one rod out towards them with the bigger baits, the baked beans or the kidney beans, and trying to winkle out perhaps a better fish there before it goes dark. But I'm also going to fish a normal waggler rig out towards that floating cage. Not as far as that, that's about halfway, so probably about halfway between the bank and the cage. Just on lighter waggler gear, and that's the line I'll be feeding very sparingly, little and often, with the wheat, with a little piece of wheat nicked on the hook. So with only a few hours to fish before it gets dark, and my fellow members telling me it's not good for bites this evening, and with baits that do sometimes take a little while to get the fish going, we'd better get cracking. I've already set up, plumbed up on the 2 lines, and I'm not going to waste a lot of time showing you the rigs, but suffice to say we'll be using a traditional insert waggler on the waggler line, 2.5 gram Visi Wag, so plenty of weight to punch it out to that 20-25 metre mark where I've been drip feeding in that wheat. I've got quite a few number 10 droppers down there. You can fish it on the drop, and if you remember that first session here, I was catching tench on the drop by the end. And with there being some decent fish in here, I want to fish fairly light. I've got a 13-foot match rod for this line, but it's down to a 3-pound bottom with a small swivel, and that's to a size 18, quite a fine wire, size 18, which just nicks into that big plump grain of wheat without being too conspicuous, but plenty of point showing, and it's just about strong enough, that hook, to handle tench based on my last session here. Now the second outfit is geared up for fishing close to big beds of lilies where you're going to have to pretty much hit and hold, and the tension here fight like demons based on previous experience. So a specialist float rod, 8-pound reel line, and on the business end we're going with this absolutely stunning hand painted quill. Can't beat watching a tip like that next to some lily pads, and even if it doesn't go under, it's going to be a pleasure fishing that with the bigger baits. And there you can see a pretty heavy wire, forged size 12 hook, 7-pound bottom, almost matching the main line, so we really can hit and hold if need be. There are 1 or 2 carp in here as well, and they do, from experience, love a baked bean. I think they're haricot beans officially, so you don't need to get them out of the tin, but it's obviously a very convenient way to access bait, just like you would corn. And of course, some of these unusual or old school bait videos can feel a little bit gimmicky perhaps at first glance. I know I'm not the first YouTuber to do something on baked beans, for example, but as I say, this isn't really about dropping crazy baits into a day ticket venue that's absolutely packed to the rafters and pulling out a few fish for the novelty value. It really is about, for me, experimenting, and in some cases, like the stewed wheat, getting back to my roots. It's certainly a bait that when I was growing up as a lad in Sheffield, I was fortunate enough to witness a few proper grown-up anglers who knew what they were doing, probably on park lakes near my home, and I distinctly remember a few of them catching much better roach than I was used to on my maggots. And I remember chatting to one chap who was good enough to show me his flask, an old tartan coffee flask that he'd brought, and he'd put his wheat in that overnight. I like to soak mine for a good day or two before I boil them, or at least simmer them very gently. But yeah, he'd done the old hemp trick of half filling a vacuum flask with the grains, the rest boiling water and leaving it overnight. And yeah, he'd had a very slow morning, but I remember that afternoon he was pulling out some beauty, sort of pound roach from a park lake that I previously thought only held, 1 or 2 ounce fish based on my experience. And that was one of those dawning moments in my early fishing career where I thought, wow, with a bit of patience, a bit of thought and a bit of advice, most importantly, it really is possible to either catch more fish or catch better fish than those around you. And it's not a bait that I use too regularly, but I do make up at least 5 or 6 bags each spring that I'll use over the summer, both in the river and on still waters. And I really have found we can pick out the better silvers on well-stocked natural venues. I've not used it particularly for tench, and I was actually intending, if I'm honest, to visit another venue this evening, which turned out to be closed, which was much more of a mixed fishery with silvers as well as tench, a few carp. And I have ended up instead on this very tench heavy venue, but I know from my first visit they are catchable in numbers. And although hemp and castor is one of those bait combos I'd go to if I really had to catch or wanted to win a match, I have got confidence in wheat, and I'm just not expecting it to be hectic to begin with. I think we're going to have to build it up, keep trickling that bait in. Fish just rose over there, which is encouraging. Yeah, it's largely tench. I think there's a few brown goldfish and one or two carp, but not many silvers at all. I didn't get any roach or rudd last time I was fishing here on the caster. But yeah, beans, something I used probably more when I was carp fishing back in my 20s, and when I wanted to do something a bit different, I've used chickpeas, kidney beans, all kinds of pulses, and yeah, I've never really targeted tench specifically with them, but I'm confident that by those lilies, certainly the baked beans, which are very similar to the wheat feed in colour and texture, I don't see why we shouldn't catch on those too. So stick with me and we'll see how we get on. And in the meantime, if you've got any either old school or slightly unusual baits that you like using, then do please leave a comment. You know I love reading your comments, and your interaction is always very much appreciated. And although the regulars have had a very slow day by all accounts, and the sun does keep shining through, I was always told this was a venue that fished best in the morning and the evening. And yeah, we are into summer now. Not sure when I'll publish this video. It's one of those I thought I'd record for when I'm perhaps a bit too busy to do one in close proximity to when I need to publish. But we are of course fishing into the dusk, and it's been a bit chilly the last few days. It's not really felt like high summer, but we will be fishing into darkness, and you've got to have a chance of tench once the sun starts getting a bit lower in the sky. So that's another factor in our favour. But let's keep that feed going in, keep everything crossed. It's turning into a beautiful evening, at least for the angler sitting in the sun. And I've just had a really enjoyable, quite lengthy chat with a fellow member called Graham. Lovely bloke. I think he's a deputy bailiff at one of our other waters, Lodge. And he was explaining about the fishing there. Plenty of carp. Good for surface fishing, so I'm sure you can watch out for a video on that over the summer. But he did say again that it's been fishing very tricky today. I think he's only had 2 fish. And admitted he is packing up at a good time, or a good time potentially for the fish to start biting, but it'd been that kind of day where he didn't fancy waiting to find out. So I'm glad I'm here starting later, and it was good to have a chat to pass some time while I've been baiting up. I have seen a few of the lilies stirring, some of the pads stirring, fishing the waggler out in front but keeping the feed going in on the right. Not a lot, just the odd bean here and there, a tiny bit of the wheat. And yeah, no indications on the waggler line yet, but that doesn't surprise me. That's you know, one thing for this bait, is it's not always an instant bait, and it doesn't worry me too much that we've not had any action just yet. If I catch 1 or 2 fish before the sun goes down, I'll be more than happy. Right, let's give kidney bean a go over by the pads. Just nicked it onto that size 12 hook. Really visual bait, shiny maroon, not a lot of scent, but again, once the fish are onto grains and beans, they'll spot that and go for it no problem. Our job is to cast alongside the pads and draw it back to the spot where we've put a bit of bait in. You might be able to tell from the angle of the light, but the sun is definitely getting a bit lower, and I've just put out the quill by the pads with a kidney bean. See if there are a few fish moving. And we've got one on the kidney beans. He's trying to go into or kidney bean should I say. He's trying to go into the lilies. You can see the first few pads there trembling, but we've got the strong gear on and worked him out. And I've got to say that's a very satisfying feeling after sitting it out for a good hour or so. Taking a little bit of line, but we've got that clutch set about right. I don't think it's a huge fish, but it's a fish on the magic bean on a tough day when not many have been catching. And it's lovely to see a fish fight below that brightly painted quill. I think he's about ready. They do fight hard in this pond from what little experience I've got. It's a tench. That's very welcome. I have to bully him into the net. And we got him. As well as a lot of weeds. Let's have a look. Well, what a feisty, stocky and lovely little tench. Really welcome after an hour's wait. As I said, that feed, the wheat feed, can take a while to switch the fish on. And I think this falling light's obviously helped as well, but lovely little fish to get on the kidney bean. First fish I've had on that bait for a long time, but it's the first time I've tried it in a long time, and it's really satisfying when you do that. Have a little experiment, do something a bit different, and it pays off, rewards your faith. So let's get this one back and we'll see whether we can get any more before it goes dark. The line has been disappointingly slow, but on a hard day you don't necessarily expect the fish to be out in the open water. They are more likely to be in the cover of those lily pads, and I'm still using that wheat feed on that spot, just with a bigger bait on the hook. So now I know there's at least one fish there. I'll put a touch more in. When I'm fishing next to the pads, I always like to put a few grains, or whatever bait you're using, in amongst the pads, because that's where the fish are hiding out, and that'll get them onto the taste and the scent of the bait. But then I like to put my main feed a good distance, maybe 2-3 feet away from the pads, because you've got to give yourself a chance of hooking those fish and then keep them out of the main body of that bed of lilies, or you're going to lose a lot of fish. So I always like to feed a little bit away from the pads, try and lure them out. So let's get another bean on the hook and give it another go. It's making me a little bit hungry. I've not eaten much for a while, but they're for the fish, not me. Clear a bit of the slime off from the last fish. There you go. But that float tip looks absolutely glorious next to the pads. It's been a long wait for a bite, but it does look like it could bury at any second, especially now you've seen it happen before. It always gives you that extra encouragement. And we've not had anything on the waggle line, but I've been fishing the quill next to the pads for a little while anyway, so I've not been giving it the attention or the feed that it probably deserves. Can't really effectively fish two float rods at the same time, not unless you're quite close together or in the margins. So I'm going to leave the waggler now, keep feeding the beans and the wheat next to the pads, and we'll see whether we can get a brace before nightfall. You've got to love summer evenings, especially by the water. The scent from these elderflowers is really heavy, but somehow subtle at the same time. It's sweet and fruity. It makes you think of cordial or wine. Beautiful flowers. The pond is like a mirror, completely still. There's been a lot of evenings like that this spring and summer. Not much low pressure. It's not ideal for fishing, but it makes for a very tranquil end to an evening. Just look at that for a completely clear sky, very different to when we turned up. And my only complaint at the moment is probably the midges. They really are active tonight. I think I'm the only angler left on the lake, so I've got a 2.5 acre estate lake to myself. It's not often that happens. Fish just topped or rolled just past one of the fish cages out there. There's definitely a bit more activity now we're into the final hour of light, but I haven't seen too much more movement from those pads, so there's not a lot of activity even deep within them. There's not too much stirring. Maybe we have to be satisfied with one, but just keep the feed trickling in and we'll see. The light is starting to fade now. Probably about 8:15. And there's a surefire way of telling when it's getting properly dark in summer, and that's when the bats come out. 1 or 2 fish jumping as well. Small one down here. Some bigger ones have been rolling out in the middle, but not very often. And up there you can see one of the bats. And as ever, these modern digital cameras pick up every available drop of light and make it look a lot lighter than it is. I'm looking at the screen and also beyond the screen, and I can barely see the float. Probably got another 5 or 10 minutes before I have to say my goodbyes, as many more bats join the hunting party. It's always magical to be by the water at this time of night. It's probably knocking on for 10 o'clock, and it really is a treat to fish this late. Whether we'll get another fish or not remains to be seen. I've got a feeling it's not going to happen, but we'll see. Well folks, as you can see, or perhaps you can't see, the picture's going to be terrible, and perhaps you're relying on the sound more than anything, but this is my farewell. I hate finishing a session without a last fish, as you know, and it would have been great to get a brace for the video, but we have managed one on a very difficult day, very short session, and it's always marvellous to get one on an experimental bait. It's not anything new or unique, I know, but just something you've not tried in a while, and it's proven itself again on a tough day. So really happy with that one tench, and as always it's been a pleasure sharing it with you. Just sorry I've not managed to get a few more fish, and I'm recording this in the gloom with a terrible picture. But if you've not already joined this very exclusive fishing club, what are you waiting for? Hit that subscribe button for many more videos like this, and a few with lots of fish in them as well. But for all you faithful followers, thanks as always. I look forward to seeing your comments and seeing you again soon on the bank.